Hey everybody, what's going on? Eric here with Switch Adapted Toys, and today I'm going to be showing you how to adapt the Dance and Play Bluey. This was a request from @LibbyAmmerman8383. Thank you for leaving your request. If you have a toy that you want to see us adapt, leave it in the comments below. And for those of you who have already left a request, we're working on it. We'll get there. Just give us a little bit of time, but today this is what we're going to be doing, so let's get into it. Alright, so in order to get into this toy, it's completely sewn up, so we're going to have to actually cut one of these seams open. And they make these little seam splitters. What you do is you just kind of stick it in there along the seam and kind of work its way up, and it will cut all the sewing in there, and that way we can open it up. If you don't have these, you could use a pair of scissors or something, but we will need to kind of cut the fabric off of the Bluey, just kind of in the back, kind of go from the tail up to the top of the head, and then when we're all done, we'll sew that all back up. Alright, so now I'm going to kind of peel off the fabric, and I need to reveal the 6 screws on the back. So with a Phillips head screwdriver, just go ahead and remove those screws. So with those screws removed, we should be able to kind of pull off the back of the toy and set that aside. And then we're going to remove the 4 screws right here that hold the motor in place. So I had to kind of pull the fabric off Bluey's arms so that I could remove this front panel. Now, you be careful that you don't tug on it too hard because there are wires that go to the button and to the speaker, but we are looking at this button right here. That's what we want to get to. So let's go ahead and remove those 2 screws that hold that button down. And you can see that there are these 2 dots right here where these wires are hooked up to. This is where we're going to solder our headphone jack wire to, so let's go ahead and get that ready. So I've got my headphone jack wire. We buy these as generally as like splitters, so think about like sharing your headphones with somebody, but we just cut off the male end and then you actually get 2 of these, so that's a much better, it's much more cost-effective way to get these headphone jacks. You can pick them up on Amazon or Walmart or pretty much anywhere. They're pretty inexpensive. And we need to remove the exterior casing, so I'm just going to use some wire strippers to remove that. Now all these are going to be slightly different. Ours has a red wire, a white wire, and a yellow wire. 9 times out of 10, what you want to do is you want to have the white wire be separate. Now it's not going to be always the case, but from our experience, if you leave the white wire separate and then combine the other 2 wires, then your headphone jack should work. But you always want to make sure you test it and make sure it works before you get it all put back together. So what we need to do is we need to remove some of the casing on each of these wires. So the red and yellow wires, I'm going to combine. So I'm just going to twist them together. This basically just makes them essentially into one wire. So twist the wires together. And then I'm just going to trim it up a little bit just so I've got just the tip of it exposed. Just like that. And then I'm going to remove the same amount on the white wire. And there you go, that's it. And before I solder the wire to the toy, I like to get a little bit of solder on the wires themselves. It just makes it a little bit easier when I'm going to put it on the toy. So with your soldering iron heated up, all I'm going to do is bring my soldering iron in and heat up the wire, which then melts the solder. And you just basically like paint it on. So just start from the base, work your way out to the tip, just get a little bit of solder on each of those wires. Alright, so before we solder our headphone jack wire, we need to drill a hole into the toy so that we can get our headphone jack wire into the toy so that we can solder it. So what we need to do is drill a hole into the plastic here. And what you could pretty much do it wherever, but you want to just make sure that you're gonna have enough reach to get to the button. So a good place would probably be right here in the side of the toy. And then what we'll have to do is cut a little slit in the fabric itself to fish the wire through, and then we'll sew that up real tight when we're all done. Just make sure you're not going to drill into any of like the structural components of the toy, and you can go ahead and drill your hole. All right, now we can fish our headphone jack wire through the toy. And what we want to do is put a zip tie on the inside of the toy. That just creates a barrier so that if a child or somebody were to yank on the cord just doesn't come completely out. It doesn't really matter the size of the zip tie. I find that the smaller the zip tie, the better, because you can kind of get a better grip on the wire. But go ahead and cinch it down real tight and give it a good tug and make sure it's not going to go anywhere. If it's slipping a little bit, what you can do is add a little super glue or CA glue kind of around that zip tie, just to kind of lock everything in place. You can go ahead and snip off any extra zip tie. Alright, so now we're ready to solder. So like I said, we're going to solder to these 2 points where these wires are connected to. One wire from your headphone jack is going to go to each. It doesn't matter which one goes to which. And we're just going to heat up the solder that we put on the wires the first time. Important thing is you want to make sure that you don't let solder kind of cross over and touch both of these connections at the same time. Otherwise, the toy is just going to constantly go off. And you can kind of give your wires a little bit of a tug just to make sure that they're on there good and they're going to stay there. And that's it. Let's get a button and test it before we put it all back together. I've got a button plugged in, I've got the Bluey turned on, and I just made sure that all the moving parts are kind of free from wires and fabric and stuff like that. You don't want to get anything caught up. But let's get the button to press and let's make sure it works before we put it all back together.
That's my musical statue.
There you go. So we should be good to put it all back together. So the first thing we need to do is re-secure the button. So there's just 2 pegs that the button kind of fits into, and then there's 2 screws that hold it down. Alright, now the front of the toy can go back on. Make sure you're not going to snag any of the fabric or pinch it. And then we can use those 4 screws to re-secure the motor. And then we can go ahead and re-secure the back. Alright, so now that we got everything back together, we need to get the fabric back on. We will worry about getting the headphone jack out here in just a second, but first we need to get the arms back in. There we go, and then fit the fabric over the top. Alright, so the headphone jack wire is coming out right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to split the seam right here, and I can fish my cord out the side. That'll just be a little bit cleaner to sew up this seam than to cut a hole through the fabric. And then I'm going to push my headphone jack wire around until I can get it out that hole. Alright, so now we need to sew everything back together. Alright, so that's pretty much it. This is where I'm going to leave you because, to be honest with you, I'm not a very good sewer. So I'm going to watch a couple YouTube videos so that I can get this guy sewed back up. But if you know how to sew, go ahead and stitch them up. Make sure you kind of secure the hole where we cut for the wire, and you should be good to go. If you like this video, please hit the like button, hit subscribe. It really does help us out in a huge way, so thanks in advance for that. If you want to find out more about Switch adapted toys, you can do so on our website at www.switchtoys.org. There we've got a bunch of different resources. We've got other toy manuals, we've got other videos that show you how to Switch adapt toys. We've got 3D printer plans on there, so you can take those files and print your own adapted toy Switch that are very good, to be honest with you. And if you've got a group or an organization and you want to adapt these toys kind of on a bigger scale for kids in your community, you can form what's called a Switch chapter, and there's information on our website, and I'll link to it below. But yeah, we provide resources for you to do that and bring these toys to kids in your community. So I think that's pretty much it. So I'm Eric with Switch Adapted Toys, and until next time, we'll see you.
Switch adapted toys, making play possible.